Jake Morrison stepped off the transport shuttle and looked around at the most amazing place he had ever seen. The Zephyrian Academy stretched out before him like something from a dream. Tall crystal towers reached toward the purple sky, connected by floating bridges that seemed to hold themselves up by magic. Students of all shapes and sizes moved along the pathways, some walking, some floating, and some sliding along in ways Jake had never imagined. He pulled his heavy backpack higher on his shoulders and checked the data pad in his hand. Building 7, Room 4A. His first class would start in 20 minutes. Jake had been preparing for this moment for 2 years, ever since Earth joined the Galactic Educational Exchange Program. He was one of only 12 humans selected to attend the academy this year. The other students stared at him as he walked past. Jake tried to smile and wave, but most of them quickly looked away or moved to the other side of the path. He had expected this reaction. Humans were new to the galactic community, and they came from what everyone else called a death world. A tall, thin creature with blue skin and 4 arms approached him. "Excuse me," it said in perfect English, thanks to the universal translator everyone wore. "Are you the human student Jake Morrison?" "Yes, that's me," Jake replied, trying not to stare at the being's extra arms. "I am Keth, your assigned guide. I will help you find your classes today." Keth's voice was calm and polite, but Jake noticed how the alien kept a safe distance between them. "Your first class is Comparative Biological Systems with Professor Ziltaner. It is considered one of the most important classes here." They walked together through the academy grounds. Jake marveled at the different species of students around him. Some looked like walking crystals that sparkled in the sunlight. Others floated in the air like living clouds. There were beings that looked like giant flowers, and others that seemed to be made of liquid metal. "How many different species attend the academy?" Jake asked. "This year we have students from 63 different worlds," Keth replied. "Though most come from what we call garden worlds, planets with gentle climates and peaceful ecosystems." "What about death worlds?" Jake asked. "Are there other students from dangerous planets?" Keth stopped walking and turned to look at Jake with all 4 of his large eyes. "You are the first Death World student we have ever had. Earth is classified as a Class 12 Death World. Most of us cannot imagine how any intelligent life could survive on such a planet." Jake felt a mix of pride and loneliness at those words. Earth was dangerous compared to other worlds, but it was still home. He loved the mountains and forests, the oceans and deserts. He had grown up camping with his family, swimming in lakes, and hiking through wilderness areas. To him, Earth was beautiful, not terrifying. They reached Building 7, and Keth led him to Room 4A. The classroom was unlike anything Jake had seen before. Instead of regular desks and chairs, there were platforms and surfaces designed for different types of beings. Some students sat on cushions, others floated in special containers filled with gas, and a few stood at tall lecterns. "Jake Morrison, I presume?" The voice came from the front of the room. Professor Ziltaner was a Zephyrian, tall and elegant, with silver skin and long, flowing hair that seemed to move on its own. "Welcome to our class. Please take a seat wherever you feel comfortable." Jake found an empty chair designed for humanoid species and sat down. He looked around at his classmates. There were about 20 students in the room, and all of them were staring at him with curiosity and what looked like nervousness. "Class," Professor Ziltaner began, "today we have a special addition to our group. Jake Morrison comes to us from Earth, a planet that presents unique challenges for life. I hope we can all learn from his experiences." A student that looked like a walking crystal raised what might have been a hand. "Professor, is it true that Earth has active volcanoes and earthquakes?" "Yes," Jake answered before the professor could respond. "We have both. Some of the volcanoes are still active, and we get earthquakes pretty regularly in some areas." The crystal student's light dimmed noticeably. "How do you survive?" "We build our cities away from the most dangerous areas," Jake explained. "And we have warning systems to let people know when something dangerous might happen." A floating, cloud-like being spoke next. "But what about the predators?" We heard that your world has creatures that hunt and eat other animals. Well, yes, Jake said, not sure why this was so surprising. We have predators and prey animals just like most ecosystems need. It's all about balance. The silence in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jake looked around at the shocked faces of his classmates. On their worlds, apparently the idea of animals hunting each other was horrible to imagine. Professor Ziltaner cleared his throat. Perhaps we should start with today's lesson. We are studying how different species adapt to their environments. Jake, would you mind telling us about some of the adaptations humans have developed? Jake thought for a moment. Well, we're pretty good at adapting to different climates. Humans live in deserts, mountains, forests, and even in the Arctic. We make tools to help us survive, and we work together in groups. What about the dangerous animals? Asked a student that looked like a large, colorful bird. How do you protect yourselves? Most animals aren't really dangerous if you know how to act around them, Jake said. Some of them are actually friendly. We keep many animals as pets and companions. The bird-like student's feathers ruffled with what Jake guessed was shock. You keep predators as companions? Some of them, yes. Dogs and cats are very popular pets. They're loyal and affectionate. Jake noticed that several students had moved their desks further away from him while he was talking. He was starting to realize that what seemed normal to him was absolutely terrifying to beings from peaceful worlds. Professor Ziltaner sensed the tension in the room. I think this is an excellent opportunity for all of us to learn. Jake, perhaps you could prepare a presentation about Earth's ecosystem for our next class? It would be educational to understand how life functions on a death world. Jake's face lit up with excitement. That would be great. I could show you all sorts of animals and explain how they interact with each other and with humans. The professor smiled, not realizing what he had just set in motion. Wonderful. Class dismissed. Jake, please see me after everyone leaves. As the other students filed out of the room, Jake heard them whispering to each other in their various languages. He caught a few words through the translator: dangerous, predators, and impossible. When the room was empty except for Jake and the professor, Ziltaner approached him with a kind expression. I hope you do not mind the reaction of your classmates. They come from very different worlds than yours. I understand, Jake said, though he was not sure he really did. I want to help them understand that Earth isn't as scary as they think. That is a noble goal, the professor replied. Your presentation will be a wonderful opportunity to bridge that gap. I will make sure you have access to any equipment you need. Jake left the classroom feeling excited and determined. He had no idea that his innocent desire to share his love of Earth's wildlife would soon cause the biggest panic in the Academy's history. As he walked back to his dormitory, he was already planning his presentation, thinking about all the amazing animals he could show his new classmates. He pulled out his communication device and sent a message to his sister Lisa back on Earth. Hey, Lisa, I need your help with something amazing. Can you get some animals ready for a video call? I want to show my classmates here what Earth's wildlife is really like. The response came back quickly. Sure thing, Jake. I have some great animals at the center right now. This is going to be so much fun, Jake smiled as he put the device away. He could not wait to see the looks on his classmates' faces when they met some real Earth animals. He was sure they would love them just as much as he did. 3 weeks had passed since Jake Morrison first walked into Professor Ziltaner's classroom. He had settled into life at the Zephyrian Academy better than he expected, though he still felt like an outsider most of the time. His classmates were polite but kept their distance, and Jake was starting to understand why during his 3rd week. Professor Ziltaner was teaching about predator and prey relationships in different ecosystems. Jake watched as his classmates struggled to understand the basic concepts. When the professor showed images of gentle herbivores from various garden worlds, the students nodded and took notes. But when he tried to explain how predators fit into the natural balance, confusion filled the room. Zix9, a Vortex student, whose crystalline body sparkled with different colors when she was thinking, raised her geometric hand. Professor, I do not understand why any ecosystem would need dangerous creatures. On my world, we removed all threatening animals thousands of years ago. Our planet is much safer now. But how do you control plant-eating animals if there are no predators? Jake asked, genuinely curious. Zix9's crystals dimmed slightly. We manage the population through careful planning and technology. We do not need violent creatures to do this work. Wisp, a Namari student who looked like a living cloud of purple gas, floated higher in his containment unit. My people have always lived above the ground level. We never had to deal with land-based dangers. The idea of creatures that hunt and kill each other is very disturbing to us. Jake looked around the room and saw similar expressions of confusion and discomfort on every face. These beings had grown up on worlds where the most dangerous animal might be something like a butterfly. They had never seen a food chain in action or understood why predators were necessary for healthy ecosystems, Professor Ziltaner noticed. The confusion, too. Perhaps we should approach this topic differently. Jake, since you come from a world with active predator-prey relationships, could you help explain how these systems work? Jake stood up, eager to help. Sure, on Earth, predators actually help keep ecosystems healthy. They prevent herbivores from eating too many plants, which keeps the environment balanced. And most predators are not evil or mean. They are just trying to survive, like all living things. A student named Pip, who looked like a small, colorful bird, ruffled her feathers nervously. But how do you sleep at night knowing there are creatures that could hunt you? Jake laughed, not realizing how his laughter made several students move further away from him. Most predators on Earth are not interested in hunting humans. We are too big, too smart, and too much trouble. They prefer easier prey. Too much trouble? Wisp asked, his gaseous form swirling with what Jake was learning meant confusion. What do you mean? Well, humans fight back, Jake explained. We use tools, we work together, and we are very good at defending ourselves. Most animals learned long ago that it is easier to hunt other animals than to bother with humans. The silence that followed was so complete that Jake could hear the soft humming of the Academy's environmental systems. He looked around at his classmates and saw expressions of shock and fear. To them, the idea of fighting back against predators was as foreign as the idea of living on a star after class. Professor Ziltaner asked Jake to stay behind. Jake, I've been thinking about our discussion today. Your classmates are having trouble understanding concepts that seem natural to you. Do you think you could help them learn by giving a more detailed presentation? Jake's eyes lit up with excitement. What kind of presentation? Well, perhaps you could show them some examples of Earth's wildlife. Help them understand how these animals behave and why they are important to your world's ecosystem. Jake nodded eagerly. That sounds amazing. I could contact my sister Lisa. She works at a wildlife rehabilitation center in Colorado. She takes care of injured animals and helps them get back to the wild. She knows everything about animal behavior. Excellent, Professor Ziltaner said. I will arrange for you to have access to our communication systems and presentation equipment. We could schedule this for next week. Jake could hardly contain his excitement. This is going to be so great. I can show them how friendly and amazing Earth's animals really are. The professor smiled, pleased with Jake's enthusiasm. I will need to get approval from the Academy administration, but I am sure they will be interested in this educational opportunity. It would be the first time we have had a presentation about Deathworld fauna. That evening Jake returned to his dormitory and immediately contacted his sister Lisa on Earth. Her face appeared on his communication screen, and she smiled brightly when she saw him. Jake, how are you doing up there? Are you making friends with your alien classmates? It's been interesting, Jake said. Listen, I need your help with something. My professor wants me to give a presentation about Earth's animals to help my classmates understand our ecosystem. Lisa's face brightened even more. That sounds wonderful. I have some amazing animals here at the center right now. We could do a live video presentation and I could show them how gentle and intelligent our animals are. That's exactly what I was thinking, Jake said, Maybe you could start with some of the friendliest animals? My classmates are really nervous about predators, so I want to show them that Earth's animals are not scary monsters, Lisa laughed. Don't worry, I have the perfect animals for that. We have Max, a golden retriever who is the sweetest dog in the world, and there's Whiskers, a cat who loves to perform tricks. Oh, and I just got a ball python named Samantha who is incredibly calm and gentle. Jake nodded excitedly. Perfect. What about some smaller animals too? I have a colony of harvester ants that are fascinating to watch. They work together so well, and they are completely harmless to humans. And there's a family of rabbits that just came in. They're so cute and fluffy. This is going to be amazing, Jake said. My classmates are going to love learning about Earth's wildlife. Lisa looked thoughtful for a moment. Jake, are you sure your classmates are ready for this? I mean, even the friendliest Earth animals might seem intense to beings from more peaceful worlds. Don't worry about it, Jake said confidently. They just need to understand that our animals are not the monsters they imagine. Once they see how sweet and gentle they can be, they will realize there is nothing to fear. If you say so, Lisa said, though she still looked a bit concerned. I will start preparing the animals and set up the presentation equipment. When do you need this? Professor Ziltaner is getting approval from the administration, but probably sometime next week. I will let you know the exact day and time. After ending the call, Jake spent the rest of the evening planning his presentation. He made notes about each animal Lisa had mentioned and thought about how to explain their behavior to his classmates. He wanted to focus on how these animals interacted with humans and how they contributed to Earth's ecosystem the next day. Jake could barely concentrate on his other classes. He kept thinking about the presentation and how excited his classmates would be to learn about Earth's amazing wildlife. During lunch, he sat with Zix9 and Wisp, who had become the closest things to friends he had at the academy. I have some exciting news, Jake announced. Professor Ziltaner approved my presentation about Earth's animals. I'm going to show you some real creatures from my world. Zix9's crystals flickered with what Jake had learned was curiosity mixed with nervousness. Real animals, not just pictures? Even better, Jake said. My sister is going to do a live video feed from her wildlife center. You will get to see the animals moving and behaving naturally. Wisp's gaseous form swirled uncertainly. Are you sure this is safe, even through a video screen? Jake laughed. Of course it's safe. These are some of the friendliest animals on Earth. You are going to love them. Word about the presentation spread quickly through the academy. Students from other classes began asking if they could attend. Several professors expressed interest in observing this unique educational opportunity. Jake felt proud that his presentation was generating so much interest. By the end of the week, Professor Ziltaner had received approval from the academy, administration, and reserved the grand lecture hall for the presentation. Jake was told that over 200 students and faculty members had requested to attend. This is quite an honor, Jake, Professor Ziltaner said. You will be presenting to the largest audience in the Academy's recent history. Jake grinned widely. I can't wait to show everyone how amazing Earth's animals are. They are going to learn so much about Deathworld ecosystems. As Jake prepared for what he believed would be an educational triumph, he had no idea that his definition of friendly animals would soon cause the greatest panic in the Academy's 500-year history. His innocent desire to share his love of Earth's wildlife was about to turn into an interspecies incident that would be remembered for generations. The day of Jake Morrison's presentation arrived with great excitement throughout the Zephyrian Academy. The grand lecture hall buzzed with activity as students from 47 different species found their seats. Some floated in special gas containers, others perched on crystalline platforms, and a few stood at tall viewing stations designed for their unique body types. Jake stood at the front of the massive hall, checking his equipment one final time. Multiple large screens surrounded him, ready to display the live video feed from Earth. Behind him, several secure transport containers hummed quietly, containing what he called his backup demonstration subjects that had arrived that morning. Through the Academy's specialized cargo system, Professor Ziltaner approached Jake with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Jake, I have never seen such interest in a single presentation. We have students here from every department in the academy. This is going to be amazing, Jake replied, his face glowing with enthusiasm. Everyone is going to learn so much about Earth's ecosystem. As the audience settled down, Jake noticed how his classmates had positioned themselves. Most sat in the back rows, as far from the presentation area as possible. Even Zix9 and Wisp, who had become his closest friends, were sitting much further back than usual. Welcome, everyone, Professor Ziltaner announced to the crowd. Today we have a unique opportunity to learn about life on a Class 12 Deathworld through the eyes of someone who grew up there. Jake Morrison will share with us the fascinating world of Earth's wildlife. Jake stepped forward and activated the communication link to Earth. His sister Lisa's face appeared on the main screen, smiling brightly from the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center in Colorado. Hello, everyone, Lisa waved at the camera. I am so excited to show you some of Earth's most wonderful animals. A murmur of nervous anticipation rippled through the audience. Jake noticed that several students had already moved to the very edge of their seats, ready to flee if necessary. Let's start with one of Earth's most beloved companions, Jake announced cheerfully. This is Max, a golden retriever. Dogs like Max have been human companions for thousands of years. Lisa stepped aside and Max bounded into view of the camera. The golden retriever was magnificent, large, muscular, with a thick golden coat and a mouth full of white teeth. His tail wagged enthusiastically as he looked directly at the camera with bright, intelligent eyes. The reaction in the lecture hall was immediate and devastating. Zix9's crystalline body instantly dimmed to almost black, a sign of extreme terror among her people. Wisp's gaseous form condensed into a tight ball and shot upward toward the ceiling. Throughout the hall, students began making sounds of distress in dozens of different languages. What a beautiful animal, Jake said, completely oblivious to the panic spreading behind him. Max weighs about 30 kilograms and is incredibly gentle with children and other animals. Max chose that moment to bark happily at the camera, a loud, friendly sound that echoed through the hall's speakers. The effect was catastrophic. 3 students in the front row fainted immediately. A group of flower-like beings began emitting a high-pitched whining sound that hurt everyone's ears. Several crystalline students shattered small pieces of themselves in shock. Emergency medical team to Lecture Hall 1, came an announcement over the Academy's communication system. Jake spun around to see the chaos behind him. Students were fleeing toward the exits, floating upward to escape, or hiding behind their seats. Professor Ziltaner was speaking rapidly into his communication device, trying to restore order. Wait, Jake called out. Max is completely harmless. He is one of the gentlest animals on Earth. But his words only made things worse. To beings from garden worlds, Max looked like a massive predator with powerful jaws and sharp teeth. The fact that he was 30 kilograms of pure muscle and moved with quick, agile grace made him appear even more threatening. The medical team arrived and began treating the students who had fainted. Professor Ziltaner approached Jake carefully, staying well away from the screens showing Max. Jake, the professor said in a strained voice, perhaps you could show us something smaller? Less ... intimidating? Jake nodded eagerly, still not understanding why everyone was so frightened. Of course, Lisa, can you bring out Whiskers? Sure thing. Lisa's voice came through the speakers as she moved Max out of view. A moment later, a sleek gray cat appeared on screen. Whiskers was a beautiful animal with bright green eyes and a long, graceful tail. She moved with the fluid precision that all cats possess, her head turning alertly as she scanned her environment. This is Whiskers, Jake announced proudly. Cats are wonderful companions. They are much smaller than dogs, usually weighing only about 4 kilograms. The audience's reaction to Whiskers was even worse than their reaction to Max, where Max had appeared as a large, obvious threat. Whiskers represented something far more terrifying to the alien students, a small, silent predator, Whiskers natural. Hunting instincts kicked in as she noticed movement on one of the screens showing the audience. Her pupils dilated, her body crouched low, and she began the stalking behavior that was hardwired into her species. Pip, the bird-like student, let out a shriek of pure terror. "It is hunting! The small predator is hunting!" This caused a complete panic. Students who had been trying to stay calm now joined the general exodus toward the exits. The floating students pressed themselves against the ceiling. The crystalline beings tried to make themselves as small as possible. "No, no, no," Jake called out desperately. "Whiskers is just playing. She is not really hunting anyone." But his explanations fell on deaf ears. The sight of a predator actively displaying hunting behavior was too much for beings who had never seen such a thing in their entire lives. Security forces arrived at the lecture hall, but they hesitated at the entrance. This was supposed to be an approved educational demonstration, and they were not sure if they should intervene. Chancellor Lumina Prime, the Academy's highest authority, materialized at the back of the hall. She was an ethereal, a being of pure energy who rarely appeared in physical form. Her presence meant that this situation had become a serious incident. "Jake Morrison," her voice resonated through the hall like music. "Perhaps you should pause your presentation while we restore order." Jake looked around at the chaos he had created. Students were still fleeing, medical teams were treating those who had collapsed from fear, and security forces were trying to figure out what to do. On the screens, Max and Whiskers continued to behave like the normal, friendly animals they were, completely unaware of the terror they had caused. "But I have not even shown them the really amazing animals yet," Jake protested. "I brought some creatures that are even more fascinating than dogs and cats." Every being in the hall who heard these words felt a chill of absolute horror. If these terrifying beasts were just the beginning, what horrors were yet to come? Professor Ziltaner placed a trembling hand on Jake's shoulder. "Jake, my dear student, I think perhaps we should consider ending the presentation here." Jake looked at his professor with genuine confusion. "But we have barely started." "I wanted to show them how Earth's animals interact with each other and with humans. I have so much more to share." The professor's face went pale. The idea that there were more creatures like the ones they had just seen was almost too much to bear. "What other animals did you bring?" Chancellor Lumina Prime asked. Her energy form flickering with what Jake was learning meant concern. Jake smiled brightly, still excited about his presentation. "Oh, I have some really great examples. There is Samantha, a ball python who is incredibly gentle, and I have a colony of harvester ants that work together in the most amazing ways. Plus some rabbits that are so cute and fluffy." The silence that followed was so complete that Jake could hear his own heartbeat. Every being in the hall was staring at him with expressions of absolute terror. Jake finally began to realize that something was seriously wrong. His presentation was supposed to be educational and fun, but instead he had created panic and chaos. He looked around at the frightened faces of his classmates and felt a growing sense of confusion and disappointment. "I do not understand," he said quietly. "These animals are our friends. They live with us, play with us, and help us. Why is everyone so afraid?" But as he asked the question, Jake began to see his beloved Earth animals through alien eyes for the first time. And slowly, he started to understand the magnitude of what he had done. Jake Morrison stood in the middle of the chaotic lecture hall, watching his alien classmates flee in terror. Medical teams were still treating students who had fainted. Security forces stood uncertain at the entrances, and Chancellor Lumina Prime's energy form flickered with concern. But Jake was not ready to give up on his mission. "Please, everyone," Jake called out over the noise. "I know this seems scary, but you just need to understand these animals better. Let me show you how gentle they really are." Professor Ziltaner approached Jake carefully, his silver skin pale with stress. "Jake, perhaps we should end the presentation here. Your classmates need time to recover from what they have already seen." "But that is exactly the problem," Jake insisted. "They are afraid because they do not understand. If I can just show them some really friendly animals, they will see that Earth's creatures are not monsters." Jake turned back to the screen where His sister Lisa was waiting. "Lisa, can you bring out some of our gentlest animals? Something that will show everyone how peaceful Earth's wildlife can be?" Lisa looked concerned as she watched the chaos through her camera feed. "Jake, are you sure about this?" "Everyone looks really upset. Trust me," Jake said confidently. "I know exactly what they need to see." Jake walked over to one of the transport containers he had brought from Earth. "While Lisa gets ready, let me show you one of the most peaceful creatures on our planet." He opened the container and carefully lifted out a large ball python named Samantha. The snake was beautiful, with glossy brown and tan patterns covering her muscular body. She was nearly 2 meters long and as thick as Jake's arm. Samantha had always been calm around humans, and she wrapped herself gently around Jake's shoulders and arms. "This is Samantha," Jake announced proudly, holding the python up for everyone to see. "She's a ball python, one of the most docile snakes in the world. She has never bitten anyone and spends most of her time sleeping." The effect on the audience was immediate and catastrophic. If the students had been terrified by Max and Whiskers, they were absolutely paralyzed by the sight of Samantha. To beings from garden worlds, the snake looked like a massive serpent of death. Coiled around their classmate's body, Zix-9, who had been slowly recovering from her earlier shock, immediately shattered into several smaller pieces, Wisp compressed himself into the smallest possible form and tried to hide inside his containment unit. The bird-like students began making alarm calls that echoed through the hall like sirens. "She's a giant serpent," screamed a student from the back of the hall. "It will strangle the human! No, no!" Jake called out, completely confused by their reaction. "Samantha is perfectly safe. She is not venomous, and she only eats small animals. Like mice, she would never hurt a human." But his explanations only made things worse. The idea that this massive serpent consumed other living creatures was horrifying to the alien students. Several more students fainted, and the medical team called for backup. Security forces finally decided to act. "Student Morrison, the security chief announced through a speaker, please secure that creature immediately." Jake looked around in bewilderment. Samantha was behaving perfectly, just as she always did. She was calm, relaxed, and showing no signs of aggression. Jake gently placed her back in her container, but the damage was done. "I do not understand," Jake said to Professor Ziltaner. "Samantha is one of the most peaceful animals I know. Pet stores sell pythons like her to families with children." The professor's face went even paler. "You give these creatures to children?" Jake realized he had said something wrong, but he was not sure what. Chancellor Lumina Prime floated closer, her energy form pulsing with what Jake was starting to recognize as deep concern. "Jake Morrison," she said in her musical voice, "perhaps you could show us some plant life instead? Or maybe some very small, non-threatening organisms?" Jake's face brightened. "That is a great idea. I have some of Earth's most harmless creatures right here." He walked to another container and opened it carefully. Inside was a large terrarium filled with what looked like moving sand. Jake lifted it up so everyone could see. "These are harvester ants," Jake announced enthusiastically. "They are some of the most peaceful and cooperative creatures on Earth. They work together to build their colonies and take care of each other. They are completely harmless to humans." Jake had no idea that to the alien students, the sight of hundreds of organized insects moving with military precision was more terrifying than any single large predator. The ants marched in perfect lines, carrying pieces of food and building materials. They moved with purpose and coordination that spoke of intelligence and planning. "They are swarming," Pip shrieked from where she had taken refuge near the ceiling. "Look how they move together. They are planning something." The students who had not yet fled the hall now joined the exodus. The sight of hundreds of potentially swarming insects was the final straw for beings who had evolved on worlds without aggressive arthropods. "No, wait," Jake called out desperately. "They are just gathering food. This is normal behavior. They are not planning anything dangerous." But his words fell on empty air. The first 5 rows of the lecture hall were now completely empty. Students clung to the walls and ceiling, pressed themselves into corners, or had fled through the exits. Entirely, Professor Ziltaner was speaking frantically into his communication device. Yes, Chancellor, the situation is escalating. The human student appears determined to continue despite the panic he is causing. Jake heard this and felt a surge of determination. Professor, this is exactly why I need to finish the presentation. Everyone is afraid because they do not understand these animals. If I can just show them how these creatures interact peacefully with humans, they will see there is nothing to fear. Jake, the professor pleaded, perhaps you could consider that. Your classmates may not be ready for this level of education about Deathworld fauna, but that is exactly why they need to see more. Jake insisted. Look, let me show you something that will prove how gentle Earth's animals can be. Before anyone could stop him, Jake activated his communication link with Lisa again. Lisa, can you show everyone how you interact with Max? Pet him and play with him so they can see how friendly he is? On the main screen, Lisa appeared with Max beside her. She began petting the golden retriever, scratching behind his ears and rubbing his belly. Max's tail wagged harder and he rolled over to expose his stomach, panting happily with his tongue hanging out. To Jake, this was a perfect demonstration of the bond between humans and animals. To the alien students, it looked like a human casually handling a dangerous predator with no fear whatsoever. The sight was so alien to their experience that several students began making distressed noises. See, Jake said triumphantly, Max loves human contact. He is practically asking for attention. A Vortex student who had been hiding behind a pillar suddenly spoke up in a shaking voice. The human is touching the predator willingly. How is this possible? Because Max is not really a predator to us, Jake explained excitedly. He is our friend and companion. Humans and dogs have evolved together for thousands of years. This revelation was even more shocking than the animals themselves. The idea that humans had somehow formed partnerships with predators was beyond the comprehension of beings from peaceful worlds. Chancellor, Lumina Prime's energy form pulsed with urgent light. Jake Morrison, I must insist that you end this presentation immediately. We need time to process what we have already learned. Jake looked around at the terrified faces of his classmates and finally began to understand that something had gone very wrong. His innocent attempt to share his love of Earth's wildlife had turned into a nightmare for everyone in the audience. But I still have so much to show you, Jake said quietly. I brought rabbits and some beautiful butterflies, and I wanted to explain how ecosystems work when all these animals live together. Every being in the hall who heard these words felt a chill of absolute terror. If what they had already seen were the gentle animals and there were still more creatures to be revealed, what horrors awaited them? Professor Ziltaner placed a gentle but firm hand on Jake's arm. Jake, I think we have learned quite enough for one day. Perhaps we should continue this discussion in a smaller, more controlled setting. Jake nodded reluctantly, still confused about why his presentation had caused such chaos. As he began packing up his demonstration materials, he could not help but feel disappointed. He had wanted to bridge the gap between humans and their alien classmates, but instead he seemed to have made it wider around him. The lecture hall slowly began to empty as students fled to the safety of their dormitories. Jake had no idea that his presentation would become legendary throughout the academy, or that it would fundamentally change how the galactic community viewed humanity and their incredible ability to coexist with what everyone else considered monsters. The grand lecture hall was finally quiet. Jake Morrison sat alone on the stage, surrounded by his animal containers and presentation equipment. The last of his terrified classmates had fled 20 minutes ago, and the medical teams had finished treating those who had fainted or gone into shock. Only Professor Ziltaner and Chancellor Lumina Prime remained, both keeping a careful distance from Jake and his Earth animals. Jake stared at the empty seats where hundreds of students had been sitting just an hour before. His presentation was supposed to bring everyone together through a shared love of nature. Instead, he had created the biggest panic in the Academy's history. I do not understand what went wrong, Jake said quietly, his voice echoing in the empty hall. "These are some of the gentlest animals on Earth. Children play with dogs and cats every day. People keep snakes as pets. Farmers work alongside all kinds of animals." Professor Ziltaner approached slowly, his silver skin still pale from stress. "Jake, I think we need to have a serious conversation about the differences between our worlds." Chancellor Lumina Prime's energy form settled into a more stable pattern as she materialized a chair for herself. "Jake Morrison, please help us understand. How is it possible for humans to live peacefully with such dangerous creatures?" Jake looked at them with genuine confusion. "But they are not dangerous. Well, not to us anyway. Max has never hurt anyone in his entire life. Samantha the python has been handled by hundreds of people at the Wildlife Center. The ants just mind their own business unless you bother their nest." "Jake," Professor Ziltaner said gently, "that dog you showed us weighs 30 kilograms and has teeth designed for tearing meat. To us, it looks like a perfect killing machine." "But Max does not hunt anymore," Jake protested. "Dogs stopped being wild hunters thousands of years ago when they became our companions. They eat food that humans give them." The professor exchanged a meaningful look with the Chancellor. "You mean humans feed these predators directly?" "Of course," Jake said, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "We take care of them, and they take care of us. Dogs protect our homes and provide companionship. Cats control pest animals. Like mice and rats, it is a partnership that benefits everyone." Chancellor Lumina Prime's energy form flickered with amazement. "You have formed partnerships with predators? How is this possible?" Jake thought for a moment, trying to find words that would help them understand. "I think the problem is that you see them as predators first. We see them as individuals with personalities and feelings. Max is not just a predator. He is playful, loyal, and gentle. He loves children and gets excited when his favorite humans come home." "But what if these animals decide to turn against you?" Professor Ziltaner asked. "What if their predatory instincts overcome their training?" Jake shook his head. "It does not work like that. These animals chose to live with us just as much as we chose to live with them. We have been partners for so long that we understand each other. A dog would protect a human child with its life, even against other predators." The concept was so foreign to the two aliens that they sat in stunned silence. On their worlds, the idea of trusting a predator was unthinkable. The notion that such creatures could feel loyalty and affection was beyond their comprehension. Over the next hour, Jake patiently explained how humans had learned to coexist with Earth's wildlife. He told them about farmers who worked alongside animals, about people who rescued injured wildlife, and about families who shared their homes with creatures that other species would consider monsters. "The key," Jake said, "is understanding and respect. We do not try to control nature completely. We learn to work with it. Yes, Earth is dangerous, but it is also beautiful and full of life. The danger makes us stronger, and the beauty makes life worth living." Professor Ziltaner was taking notes rapidly. "This is fascinating. Jake, your species has developed a completely different relationship with your environment than any other species we have encountered." 3 days after the disastrous presentation, something unexpected began to happen. Students started approaching Jake in small groups, no longer running away when they saw him. They asked careful questions about Earth and its animals, staying at a safe distance but showing genuine curiosity. Zix9 was the first to apologize. Her crystalline body sparkled with embarrassment as she approached Jake in the dining hall. "Jake, I'm sorry for my reaction during your presentation. I have been thinking about what you said, and I realized that I judged your animals without trying to understand them." "You do not need to apologize," Jake said. "I should have realized how different our worlds are. I should have prepared everyone better." Wisp floated down from the ceiling to join the conversation. "Jake, my people have a question. If humans can form partnerships with predators, does that mean humans are predators too?" Jake paused, considering the question seriously. "In a way, yes, humans are omnivores, which means we eat both plants and animals, but we are also more than that. We are survivors, adapters, and builders. We learn to work with our environment instead of just trying to escape from it. Word of these conversations spread throughout the academy. Jake found himself invited to smaller, more informal discussions about Earth and human society. Students, who had fled in terror from his presentation, now listened with fascination as he described life on a death world. Professor Ziltana organized a series of follow-up seminars, with proper psychological preparation for the students. Jake learned to start with less threatening examples and to explain the context before showing any animals. He discovered that his classmates were eager to learn once they understood that these creatures were not immediate threats. The presentation that had started as a disaster became the foundation for an entirely new field of study at the academy. Jake worked with Professor Ziltaner to develop a curriculum about Deathworld ecosystems and adaptation strategies. His sister Lisa was offered a position as a consulting xenobiologist, helping to prepare educational materials about Earth's wildlife. 6 months later, Jake stood once again in the grand lecture hall, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. Students filled every seat, but now they came prepared with questions instead of fear. The presentation screens showed Max the Golden Retriever, but this time the audience watched with fascination rather than terror. As you can see, Jake explained, Max demonstrates the loyalty and intelligence that made dogs such successful partners for humans. Notice how he responds to voice commands and shows affection through physical contact. A Vorthax student raised her hand. Jake, how did your species first realize that predators could become partners? Jake smiled. It probably started with mutual benefit. Early humans shared food with wolves, and the wolves helped protect human settlements. Over thousands of years, both species changed and adapted until we became true partners. After the presentation, Jake walked across the academy grounds with several of his alien classmates. They still kept a respectful distance, but their questions showed genuine interest rather than fear. Jake, Wisp asked, do you think other species could learn to live with dangerous animals like humans do? Jake considered the question carefully. I think every species has to find their own way to survive and thrive. For humans, working with nature instead of fighting against it was the key. But your species found different solutions that work just as well for you. As they reached the dormitory building, Zix9 made an observation that surprised everyone. I think I understand now why humans are so adaptable. Living with uncertainty and danger taught you to be flexible and creative. You had to learn to see opportunities where others see only threats. Jake nodded thoughtfully. Maybe that is why humans were able to join the galactic community so quickly. We are used to adapting to new situations and working with beings who are different from us. That evening, Jake sent a message to his sister Lisa on Earth. The presentation finally worked, he wrote. It just took me a while to learn how to translate between our worlds. Turns out that understanding is more important than just showing. Thanks for all your help with the animals. Lisa's response came back quickly. I'm proud of you, Jake. You found a way to build bridges between species. That is what education is really about. Jake looked out his dormitory window at the alien stars above the academy. His journey from disaster to success had taught him something important about communication and understanding. Sometimes the most valuable lessons came not from what you taught, but from what you learned about yourself and others in the process. The Golden Retriever, Max, had become the unofficial mascot of the academy, though he remained safely on Earth and appeared only through carefully managed video calls. But his image could be seen throughout the campus on posters and displays, no longer a symbol of terror but a representation of the incredible bond between humans and the natural world. Jake Morrison had succeeded in his mission to bridge the gap between humans and their alien classmates, just not in the way he had originally planned. His legacy would be remembered not as the human who terrified an entire academy, but as the one who taught the galaxy that even the most dangerous worlds could produce beings capable of incredible gentleness and wisdom.